Welcome. Your art is a spell, and it will change your life and the world around you. Today, we have a really special guest. Michelle T is going to be joining us for Your Art is a Spell, and I'm going to be reading her bio. Michelle T is the author of over a dozen books of memoir, fiction, poetry, and children's lit, including her latest, Knocking Myself Up. Her memoir, Valencia, won the Lambda Literary Award for Best Lesbian Fiction, even though it was obviously all true. Her recent-ish essay collection, Against Memoir, was awarded the PEN/America Diamondstein Spielvogel Award for the art of the essay. She is also a recipient of the legendary Rona Jaff Awards and a 2021 Guggenheim Fellow. Michelle has also started a publishing house called Dopamine Books. She's the founder of Radar Productions, the Bay Area literary nonprofit. She's the host of the Spotify podcast Your Magic and has over 30 years of experience reading tarot. All of this knowledge and wisdom has been encapsulated in her tarot book, Modern Tarot. I'm so overjoyed and excited to share this wonderful conversation I'm about to have with Michelle T. Welcome so much to Your Art is a Spell. It is such an honor to have you here, Michelle. I'm obviously, as you know, such a huge fan and someone who has been so impacted by your work. And as I know, thousands of people have, such a gift to have you on this podcast, and would love for you to share like how you're doing and yeah, how things are going right now. I know that we're in the midst of so much.
So much. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm a big fan of yours, and so I'm honored to be on this show. And gosh, how am I doing? Oh, let me drop in. Do I want to drop
Yeah.
in?
You can stay dissociated if you want to.
I don't know. It's an okay day. I like met up with like my ex-boyfriend of many, many years who I've only
Yeah.
recently sort of reconnected with. And he's on like this hardcore mystical journey, which is really cool. And so we just have lots of fun, like stuff to talk about that, like we know each other well enough that we know that we're not going to think that either one of us has gone off the deep end. We're like, no, no, I believe that. Yes, so
Right.
that was really cool and inspiring. And then, I also just sort of not knowing, and we've talked about this, like how to be processing everything that's happening in the world. And we're both
Yeah.
sort of, and I feel like a lot of people I've spoken to feel like this, where it's like you don't want to become totally panicked and like upset your whole life, because the reality is that like right now, like I am safe, for the moment, and my
Right.
family, everyone is safe. It's hard to know what to do with that when we also know that so many people aren't safe, and it's like, how can I be safe right now? And there's like a third grader in detention and a kidnapped woman in a jail in Louisiana. It's like really scary, and it's hard to know what to do with everything, with all of it.
Yeah,
So yeah.
definitely.
So kind of going back and forth between, I'm like, is this sort of, am I checking out? Is it, maybe it's okay, is it, I don't know. It's really hard to know what to do. My reality, immediate environmental reality has just been like trying to get blurbs for books that Dopamine is putting out, and, making sure everyone knows about the different events that are happening and communicating with venues and stuff like that's what I've been doing all day, is just working. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all this. Yeah, it is such a complex time and I'm similar to you. Like I want to stay up to date. I want to know what's happening and I also notice like how much it impacts me to like be in it or stay in it, and especially with the fear and the anger, everything that comes up when we connect with these systems and spaces. And I also have been turning to my work as like a refuge or as a place where I can really focus my energy, and
Yeah.
I'm just so proud of all the ways that you're showing up in the world and would love for you to just share a little bit about like what's been going on in your world. And maybe, but before that, because I know we have some stuff I want to make sure we talk about, like this amazing anthology coming up. But before we go into that though, like, can we talk a little bit about about your art journey and like how you
Yeah.
became a writer and like I'm just would love to hear like what art and writing has meant for you.
Yeah, it's really funny. I feel like writing and literature has always, always, always been a way for me to try to create community. Like my mother has this really funny story that she's always told people, even, before I knew that I'd be able to be a writer or anything, that like when I was really little, I was like in the front yard at the fence trying to call people into my yard to play with me, being like, I have books. I have books, come play with me. And she was like,
I
this kid
love
is pathetic.
this.
But I feel like
That is so
I feel
precious.
that. I'm like, "You guys, I have
Yes.
books, I have toys, I have books, come play with me."
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah,
Like
I
warms my
really
heart so much to think of young Michelle with her books, just calling people over. That's so sweet.
nothing has changed. It's
Yeah.
all just been about that, I guess, and
Yeah.
I was thinking I will talk about writing, but I was really thinking about how much creating like community around writing has is really such an enormous part of my spiritual work, in a sense, because
Mm,
it's the area where my ego is less involved, not involved. Like ego is always there, trying to take credit for everything, but it's so much more peaceful for me and less fraught in a way where I really feel like I know that I'm being of service. Whereas sometimes with writing, it's really hard to know that you're being of service because it's so me oriented, especially when I'm writing about myself. And it just feels like I'm
right.
scratching this compulsive itch. But that's a little off topic, perhaps. I started writing really young. I tried to make like a class newspaper when I was in second grade. I wrote an article, chickenpox taking over the second grade, interviewed people. When I was
Yeah,
like,
critical news.
exactly. I wrote lots of poems about like against hunting from the perspective of animals, as if I lived in a
Yeah.
rural area. Like I did not. I think I just saw Bambi and I was like, well, that seems terrible.
Yeah.
Um, I like by the time I was 16, 17, I was a goth kid in the 80s in New England. There was this really cool magazine called B-Side that I really liked. And I was like, they should do an article about Christian death. Nobody ever writes about Christian death. They're the best band. And so I like wrote them a letter just complaining basically. And they were like, do you want to interview Christian death? As if I was a person and not a teenager. It was
Right.
wild. And so that was my first published writing was I got to like Valor from Christian Death called me from like England on my shitty little phone in Chelsea, Massachusetts, and I wrote this article about Christian death.
I
I
love that. And I love that you like use your anger of like what this is missing and turned into an opportunity. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I didn't think of it like that, but it's really true. Um, I went to college for like 2 semesters. I kind of no one in my family had gone to college, and it was just this weird thing where like my mother really encouraged us to go to college because she recognized we were smart and that was me and my sister and that was like what we should do. But when it came down to it, no one really knew how to do that. And I went to a vocational high school, so
Hmm.
the high school didn't have resources to help either. They were like, you want to go to college? Why did you come here? So I managed to figure out 2 semesters and then I ran out of money and it was so overwhelming. And I just wanted to be a writer the whole
Yeah.
time. And I wasn't going for writing. I was going for like psychology because I just thought, well, I already write. I should learn. Because at that point, I'd been writing short stories and I sort of identified as a writer, even though I didn't know what I was doing that much. I had done some
Hmm.
zines. So coming out of high school, I had done a zine. Um, and so I just decided I would be a writer. And through a series of romantic mishaps, I wound up in San Francisco with my best friend Peter. And I didn't know that there was like both a huge like dyke punk, sexy renaissance happening, or like a literary spoken word pre-slam poetry, you know, kind of punk and hip hop
Yeah.
influenced poetry thing happening. And I fell into both of them. And I was like, wow, this whole time I've known I was a writer, but I didn't know what that meant. Like I didn't know how you got published. I never thought I'd be published. I was often held back from doing the writing I wanted to do because I was sort of like, well, why? Then like what do I do with it? But suddenly I was like, oh, I bring it to these open mics and I stand up on the stage and I read it and I get to be part of this cool thing where there are all these like weird, interesting people talking about their lives and writing stories and poetry. And so I did that. And I started making poetry chapbooks. I found people who are still in my life and like so dear to me to this day, like Ali Liebegot, Beth Lissick, Justin Chin, who's not with us anymore. But like all these people were also Bucky Sinister. They were showing up in these places and it was so cool. And that's how Sister Spit started. When Sini Anderson moved to San Francisco, she'd been doing spoken word in Chicago and wanted to start like an all girl thing in San Francisco. So the folks at the Bearded Lady was like, "Oh, you should talk to Michelle T. I think she does that kind of stuff." And so I had brought her this like stack of chapbooks, and I'm like, "You got to get Marcy Blackman. You got to get Daphne Gottlieb." I was like, "Just here's all the writers," and she was like, "Do you want to do this with me?" And so I was like, "Oh yeah, sure." So that's how we started Sister Spit. We did it every week. It was a weekly open mic, which seems so excessive now because it seems like things happen monthly, if at all now. But at
You had
that,
the energy back then. Yeah.
yeah, it was every week.
Yeah.
So clubs were every week. Open mics were every
Right.
week. So we did it for a few years, and then we kind of got burnt out, took a break. I was in a band. My band was really shitty. We didn't stop us from going on tour. So we went on tour up the Pacific Northwest, and I loved being on tour. I didn't like being in a band. I found the musicians to be really like snooty and like cold. And like I was so used to this very warm, encouraging queer
Mm,
literary scene. And I was like, oh, and I hated, I was playing drums and I was like, oh, this is so arduous. Like, put the drums together, take the drums down. Like, with
right.
writing, you just get your notebook and that's all you need. So when I got back, I told Sydney, I was like, we should tour. Why can't we tour? Like we're actually good. Like all these writers we know are actually really good. My band is not like maybe we can do something. And so that's how we started doing Sister Spit. And it's been off and on since that time in different
Yeah.
formations. Me and Cindy did it for a while. Then Cindy did it for a minute without me. I did it for a minute without her. Then we did it together again a few years back. So yeah, and through all that, I was writing. I was writing poetry but I kind of wanted to tell more of the story. My poems were always about little things that had happened.
Mm,
And I found myself wanting to tell more of the story, but I didn't really know what that meant. And I found Eileen Miles's book, Chelsea Girls, and I was like, whoa, this is it. This is what I want to do. They're doing it. Someone published it. I guess it's real. I don't
right.
know why. Is this a thing? I don't know. It's like I didn't want to waste my time or something. Um,
Mm,
so I started writing, these little sort of vignettes about my own experience. And then again, not trying to write a book per se, writing them to be read out loud again in this really great performance scene that was happening in San Francisco. But what happened was I just amassed a bunch of work and it all had the same main character, me. And so it was pretty easy to sort of thread them together and create a book. And Eileen helped me get my first book, which was amazing. I sort of like stalked them into being my friend. I kind of got their phone number and their address I stole it from someone's address book and like sent them postcards. And they came and read it Sister Spit, and I read something the same night to try to impress them. And they did like it. And they'd asked me to send them some work under the guise of it being for a journal. But what they did was they actually passed it to Kraus from Semiotext Native Agents and told Chris to publish it, and Chris did. And so that was my first book. And really almost all my books, especially at the beginning, I got from community and from friends. It's
right.
like for Valencia, Cindy's roommate was Inga Musio at the time, who had just published her book Cunt on Seal Press, and she connected me
Mm,
with Seal, and then I did a bunch of work with them. And once I had a couple books published, I realized like, oh my God, I think I'm writing books now. Like I was like, I think I can kind of keep doing this, and that was really cool
right.
because
Like
then
this is real, right?
yeah, it was really
Yeah.
cool because before that I was, writing for performance. So it had this
Right.
very, and it really influenced my voice in a way that I really appreciate, like no regrets at
Hmm.
all. But there was still this sort of like, I'm up here for 5 minutes. I got to grab people, big emotions, funny,
Mm,
sexy, angry,
yeah.
traumatic,
Yeah.
and then the more I kept writing, the more I kept sort of presuming that I'd be able to get it published. And I took more time. And then I let things that I was writing things to be read, not read aloud, but like for people to read. And I got to kind of take my time a little bit more and slow down, be poetic if I wanted to. Oh yeah. That's how it all
Wow.
started.
Thank you so much for taking us on this huge journey of like really seeing the formative years of their our practice developing. And I'm just like really struck by a couple of things and I'm like trying to see how they come together. Sitting with the paradox that you were sharing of like writing being something that could be like individual or like insular, or even as you're saying, a little bit of scratching that itch, right? And how it also like facilitates like connection and community and creates space for something to happen. And thinking about that transition that you shared from like performing, from really having something that you want to be punchy and like powerful, to then thinking of another audience, right? That's going to be
Mhm.
taking on another journey that might take more time or have more space for nuance. And like, yeah, I'm curious about your thoughts around maybe this like tension or the way that you've like witnessed that development of your internal voice. And who do you imagine, or are you envisioning someone, or is it really a, this is me excavating in my own life and looking at my own experience? And if someone likes it, great, but you're not really thinking of them. So yeah, wondering
Right.
if you
That's
got
a
anything
really
from that.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a great question. I mean, that's something that people think about. It's like, who am I writing this for? Like
Right.
who's my audience? And I think especially when I was starting out, I was writing for some sort of like projected version of myself, just like some girl who was sort of like lost and needed to read about her own experience, who wasn't seeing
Right.
herself, and then
Yeah.
that changes through time. It's been like decades, right? And it's like that girl, who's just really a white gay girl. You know what I mean? It's like she's lots of things for her now out in the world. It's lost, which is, it's lost a little bit of that, like, I gotta. It's really important to tell this story. It's like I don't really feel like that anymore. I mean, on a really cosmic level, I do feel like everyone's story is important, but it's
Right.
also, not without a lot of critique and thought about whose stories get deemed important in our culture and things like that, And so I feel differently about that, about my own identity participating in that sort of at
Right.
this point. But it's still, I'm still a writer, so I'm still here. So it does get a little bit like, yeah, who is this for? Somebody's shared really good advice once to like write to impress a writer that you love. And I've definitely
Mm,
written a lot to impress Eileen Miles. I
yeah.
definitely often think like, would Eileen like this? And the writing I like best of myself are the pieces that I do think she would like, or they would like, the pieces that I'm writing for them. Those are the ones that I
Right.
like the best. What's happened more recently, which is really strange, is that I've gotten an agent. I've had an agent for a little while now, but
Mhm.
I've been able to sort of place books with bigger presses and actually get some money, which is important because I really needed it and still need it. But it really did and has fucked with my voice, because then suddenly I don't know who I'm writing for. Like if I'm writing a book that like a small, mid-sized independent press is gonna put out, like, I kinda know who I'm writing it for, and I'm very comfortable with that. And then, if I'm writing it for this bigger press and they've given me some money, then it's like it's terrible how much it gets in my head and under my skin, where I feel like I need to be writing to all these people so that all these people buy this book, so that the press makes their money back, their
Mm,
investment in me,
right.
and so that this can keep happening and I can keep making my living this way. It's been a real mixed bag. I mean, I'm really, really grateful that I'm able to, keep publishing with presses that have more resources, but
Right.
it's been a struggle to try to bring my voice back to myself and not feel like suddenly my voice, my inherent voice is getting a little bit hijacked by some lady who's like talking to the ladies out there or something. Like it's really weird, I've got
Right.
some books that I've put out that like I don't really like them, but I do get messages from people that were like, "Oh, that book was so important to me." And all I can think is that like, well then it was for you. Like that book was for
Right.
you and I'm so glad it found you. It wasn't for me. And I do have a larger feeling about all of this, where I just feel like what happens to my work after it leaves me is almost none of my business, even as it's coming
Mm,
out of me. I
right.
try not to be too intense about, is this good? Is this bad? I mean, you have to some extent, feel satisfied with it. But, I've definitely put books out there that I'm just like, oh, there's something weird about that book. And I just have to be like, oh, well, did my best.
Right.
So yeah, it's really strange. I'm working on a book right now that I'm really, really being intense about keeping the voice to a place that I like. And I'm just hoping that, you know, that everyone will be happy with it. And I don't know. It's really weird. There's a lot more what I didn't realize about once you do get larger, or maybe this isn't true for all writers, but for me, in getting these larger advances, there's a little bit of like, well, now you have to write in this way. Like you put together this proposal, which is a lot of bullshit, right? Because who knows what the book is going to be? It's like writing a grant. You're
Right.
like, I think I'm going to do this. And
Right.
then yeah. And then you're like, oh, I guess I got to do this now. And like, you're kind of beholden to this weird proposal. And like for myself, I just want to go over here and over there and over here and be weird. And I keep having to be like, no, you made this vow to this publisher in the form of this proposal, which is a bunch of bullshit. And now you need to like stay on track. And I think that's what messes with my voice when I feel that I can't be really free and wander and
Mm,
make weird connections and digress and go on tangents.
right. Yeah, and I can really hear that from the way that your work started early on, right? As you were saying, like I wasn't looking to make a book. I was just really taking all these experiences, writing about them, and somehow they connected, right? And to think of going to the other stage where you're naming, like having a plan and having to stick to that plan or feeling pressure to stick to that plan, alongside also what you're naming too, of going from your own personal experience to then talking to this like audience that you're hoping will connect, right? And finding a way to like translate or to bring that. I definitely understand that struggle. And thank you for naming that. I'm sure there are other folks who could really resonate with that. And yeah, and I'm curious, like, what have you found helpful in terms of you, as you're saying now, working on a new book, coming back to your own voice? Has there been like a process of like reclaiming or kind of re-remembering this like process that you thrive in?
I mean, I think that trusting when it feels good, right? And like
Yeah.
really trusting like when I'm really in a flow with it. And sometimes that works, sometimes this I've definitely written pieces that I thought were really awesome, and then I go back and I'm like, oh, I was really caffeinated and I was feeling good. But
Yeah.
even those pieces, I feel like I don't know if I feel good about them, even if they need to be cleaned up and tweaked, I'm on the right track. And I think that it's really about that, about really almost like paying a little bit of attention to how it feels in my body is real, then keep doing it. I
Yeah.
think that's what it is. I think I know, honestly. And a little bit is about trusting myself and also like trusting that, sometimes I think I'm so weird and I'm like not. Like I'm not that weird. You know what I mean? Like I'll be like, "Oh, this is too weird. Don't make it so weird." And then I'm like, why am I so self-censoring? Like I just think I don't know if it's a product of like growing up during the time that I grew up in and in the way and just hearing, that you are too weird, that there's like a fear of like, oh, if I let everyone know how weird I really am. Or like if I'm myself, it's not somehow not okay. I have to like pretend to be like cleaner, more normal. I don't know, but
Hmm.
this is just a drama that's happening inside my head. I don't think it's happening anywhere else. But that's where it fucks you up. That's where it gets in the
Right.
way of your writing.
Yeah, and you haven't really used this language, but what you're making me think of is like when folks talk about masking, right? Or like
Mhm.
kind of having to have like that like part of you that develops to bridge between the normie world and like the weirdo world, right? And then
Yeah.
yeah, and then as you're naming, as you get bigger, that world grows, right? And so then
Mhm.
like that distance between that self-perceived weirdness and the culture that you're hoping will buy your book, like that's like such a wider and wider gap, right? So I like totally can imagine why this part of you just shows up and is like, are they gonna get you? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, but you just have to trust it and go for it. Like my editor actually said, "Be gonzo with it," and I was like, "Ooh,
I love
that feels like some good
that.
permission. Like I don't need to. And it's also just like not censoring yourself in advance,
Yeah,
because you don't know what people are gonna what's gonna fly and what isn't. And so yeah, it's a little of that. I do feel like, I think that it feels like on some level like such an incredible stroke of incredible luck that I'm able to make a living off a writer. And I think there's always a part of me that's afraid that I'm gonna like do the wrong thing and it's all gonna blow up. And so
yeah.
it's that I think that kind of weighs on me and then trickles into my voice, and then my voice doesn't feel as enjoyable or authentic. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Makes sense, yeah, especially being artists, like, it can be so precarious, right? And it is
Yes.
so also like a roller coaster where you're, like, all of a sudden receiving all the money and, like, then you don't know what's gonna happen, right? And it's just
Yeah.
like, I think as an artist, you do develop these parts that are always, like, trying to think about the future, trying to think about what's like, next, and I'm really glad that you share that because I feel like especially as artists get, like, larger, that there can be this perception that it's like, "Oh, they're set, they're fine," and it's like,
Yeah.
no matter what, I think for artists, this journey is always gonna have its ups and downs, and I think we're always gonna have that feeling of like, "I'm so grateful that I get to do this," because it is such a gift to be able to make a living from your creative practice, and
Yeah,
it
it
is
totally
very
is.
tenuous in our country, you know?
It's very, very tenuous. Yeah. No, I know. I hear that all the time from there's like so many, creative people who are beloved, and I think that
Right.
people might think that they're just like never worry about how could they possibly worry about money? They're so like popular or whatever. Everyone loves them, but it's like, yeah, if you, I just feel like in this country, like if you don't have like family wealth, you're never comfortable. You're
Yeah.
always worrying about like what's gonna happen. Can you keep it going? What's gonna happen?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And and I'd like to pivot a little bit because I would love to talk about dopamine and especially with you, like kind of bringing in this idea of scratching an itch. Like, I'm just curious, like, what made you decide to call dopamine? And also, if you want to just share what made you decide to move in this direction in your life.
Yeah. Well, it's very late in history to name a thing.
Right.
So many things have been named, and I sat with my like collaborator Beth Pickens, and we were going through all of these different names, and just they're all taken like by other presses, and some of these presses, it's like they put out one book 10 years ago, but they still have a little bit of a presence, and you just kind of can't touch it. And I knew as we were in this process, I'm like, we're gonna hit the name that it's meant to be. Like, we got attached to names we couldn't use, and I'm like, it's fine. That wasn't ever supposed to be its name. And when it landed on dopamine, and then couldn't find anything else that was dopamine, and we're like, oh, okay, I guess it's dopamine. And now it's like, of course it's dopamine. I mean, I'm such a dopamine machine as somebody who's historically been prone to addiction, and just I feel very aware of the different things in life that kind of give me that little lift, and I'd love for these books to give people a little lift, and working on it gives me a lift. Like, it gives me dopamine. Like, I love collaborating. I love booking tours. I love putting an anthology together. It feels like that dinner party question, like, who are 4 people you'd like to invite to a dinner party? It's like, who are 30 people you'd like to invite to an anthology about sluts? It's like
I
so
love
fun.
that.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. I in San Francisco, where I lived for like 25 years, I was always putting on like literary shows. Even after Sister Spit sort of stopped, I was doing a lot of events. And I began to be mentored by this like queer elder, Jeff Jones, who a lot of his activism was in creating grant funding and figuring out how to get into San Francisco government and take some of that arts funding and redirect it to organizations that were led by people of color, women, and queer people, and had smaller budgets because all this money was going to like the opera and the ballet and all these kind of traditional art. And he did it. And then what he started doing was looking around and thinking, okay, who are these scrappy queers that are basically a one person nonprofit but don't know it? And that was
Right.
definitely me. And
Right.
so he kind of sat me down and was like, you're basically a nonprofit organization. You just have no
Mm,
funding and no money. And
wow.
let's let's do it. And so with his help, I was able to start a nonprofit called Radar Productions. And I ran it for 13 years, and we did lots of cool stuff. We brought Sister Spit back under that. We did a writing retreat in Mexico for folks who'd worked with us. So it's like 400 people were eligible every year.
Mhm.
We did like a poetry chapbook prize. We were able to give grants occasionally. We just did a lot. And we ran a monthly event at the public library that was really, really fun. So I did that for a long time. And I had to let it go when I moved to LA because our funding was so San Francisco specific. I couldn't really bring it
Right.
with me. And I wanted to like wait and see like what the lay of the land was. I didn't want to like roll into town and be like, there's a new literary series in town, Los Angeles. I was like, well, what's
Right.
happening, you know? And I did, you know, I did some things here and there, but I started really itching to do something really like bigger. And I contacted Beth Pickens, who I'd done Radar with, and she's like totally the other half of like everything I am bad at, she is good at. She's also good at everything I'm good at. She's good at everything like holistically. But like she's good at all the business end of stuff. And I was like, if she wants to do something with me, I'll do it. And she did. And you know, at first I thought of doing like a Radar organization again, but maybe with some publishing this time. And then I quickly realized
Hmm.
that to bring in publishing at all sort of meant that like you just were doing it like kind of took over everything really quickly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've always wanted to publish. You know, when I was doing Radar, I like sat down with like Dave Eggers. Like I remember sitting down with him on the curb, like outside of McSweeney's on Valencia, and just like picking his brain, being like, how do you publish? Like how do you make it work? Because I've always been scared of the financials of it.
Hmm.
So I started doing that here too. I spoke to some different people about small presses, like what's the nuts and bolts of it? How do you do it? Because I'm 54 now, and something happened when I hit like 52, where I was like, oh, all these things that I'm like, I'm gonna do that someday. I'm like, fucking think the time is now. Like, you know,
Yeah.
not that I can't and won't keep doing things, you know, for the next decades. Of course I will, but it just suddenly felt a little like, maybe if you really want to do this, you really should do it right now. So that's why I did it.
Yeah.
Um, I met with Eddie L. Colty from Semiotext, and they published my, you know, my first book, and I love everything they do. And he's such a generous person. I knew he would share information with me, but he did even more than that. What I was really stuck on was how do you print the books and make the physical books, and how do you distribute them? And he was like, "Oh, why don't we do that for you?" But he said it in a
Wow.
great French accent, right? Like, "Oh,
Yeah.
why don't we do that?" You know? Um, and so it's this
Amazing.
incredible, yeah, it's wild. It's so generous. I mean, we pay for it. You know, I've done imprints before. I did a brief imprint with City Lights called Sister Spit Books. And I also started an imprint at the Feminist Press called Amethyst Editions that's still
Yeah.
going, but I don't do anything with it anymore. And
Hmm.
those were great experiences, but they were ultimately limited because I had limited like power. You know, I always had
Yeah.
to get approval for the books that I wanted. And I knew I didn't want to be in a situation like that again. I wanted to really feel like this is a real press that I get to be the at the helm of. And Eddie's really into that too. You know, he's like, you do whatever you want, you know, we're not going to do anything. And then, you know, we pay for everything. We have a commissioning fee for our writers, which is not in advance. Advances you have to earn back. Commissioning fee, this is
Right.
just take the money and run. You start earning your money back right away from your royalties. And we're a nonprofit. We get to do 4 books a year. One of them are these anthologies. Slut was last year, Witch is this year. And those are these like sort of like benefit shows for the press. We ask people, you know, we only have a small amount to offer contributors. We do ask if they're able to for them to donate it back to the press, and it's fine if they can't. But then, you know, the royalties that come in from it just go right into the press. They go right into the next book. And I was like, okay, that might be a good little source of income that we can rely on while we're getting started. So yeah, it's been so fun.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm, just really touched by how you got to that point where you knew that you needed to do it now. And it's been so incredible to witness what's happened since you've opened up and started to publish books. And I'd love for you to share more about the Witch Anthology. I'm like so excited to be in it. And I'm just like so grateful to be able to be invited to this wonderful dinner party that we're all a part of and that it could benefit dopamine. And I would love for you to talk a little bit more about this anthology because I really want to encourage folks to get it for themselves and to share it with their friends.
Yeah. You know, my idea was kind of the same as with the last year's book Sluts, which was that, you know, I invited writers that I knew would have something to say about it. Not to say whether they're sluts or not. They probably are, but they've written about sex or that there's something to their work that I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. But then I also
Yeah,
asked a lot of people who I had no idea what their relationship to that word is. I didn't know from their
mhm.
work. And I was really curious also to see what they would do. So I did the same with this. Like I asked people who are creative people who I knew had a spiritual tradition, a mystical tradition, a witchy tradition to be in it, to really ground the book in that. And then I also asked a lot of people who I don't know what they think of anything. I like their writing and there's something there that makes me think they'll have something to say to it. So it's great. It's a real combo of work that's coming from right from the heart of practitioners and they're sharing like what their journey has been, or they're sharing rituals and things that can inspire readers to like do a ritual like that themselves. Or there's like fiction writers who are writing something that has like something a little mystical, a little spooky, a little otherworldly to it. Um, this one has a lot more poetry. It's really funny, is like reaching out to people for a witch book, you get a lot of poems because poems are so close to spells,
Yeah,
right? I mean, there's
definitely.
such a tight relationship. So this funny thing happened when we got, I'll show you. We have copies of the galley. I mean, not only are you in it, Edgar, and you gave us your incredible diary, but you let us use one of your perfect art pieces for the cover, and it's so
Yeah.
incredible. Oh, it's so
I love how
beautiful.
it turned out. It looks so
Me
wonderful.
too.
Oh my gosh. And so honored to have my art on the cover. And
I mean,
yeah,
I'm
to be
so
a part of
honored.
so
I'm
many
so honored
people
that
that
you felt comfortable.
yeah, and I'm like love the people that you've invited. It's like so cool to know that we're all together and that this is going to benefit so many people because I know the power of artists and writers coming together and witches coming together to share our words and our energy. And yeah, this is such a gift to the community. And I'm definitely going to be providing all the links for folks who want to order it. They're going to be where you expect them. So just want to let folks know that. And want to ask you, Michelle, is it okay if we pivot a little bit to get some Q&A? I will,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
wonderful. I asked folks on my newsletter to share some questions they might have for Michelle. And a few of you wrote to me, and I'm excited to ask some of these questions. And in case you're wanting to ask a question in a future episode, want to invite you to get onto my newsletter. You can find it by going to yourartisaspell.com. And I'm going to start off by asking the first question here that is from Joey Yancey. And they say, I currently live in Boise and I'm considering moving out to the West Coast. How do you think the changing economic landscape of cities like San Francisco has affected underground artistic communities that were so formative in your early writing? And where do you see today's emerging queer writers finding their creative homes?
Oh, this is such a good question. Obviously the story of what happened to San Francisco, was national news. I mean, I feel like everyone really knows. And what happened to, New York City, of course, before that, a little before
Yeah.
San Francisco. I mean, we lost, and by we I mean like lower income creative people like lost the cities that, and especially as, queer creative people, we need to go to those cities to find each other. So it's hard. It's been very hard. And at the same time, I don't want to speak like there's not creative people still in those cities trying to make it work, making art, figuring it out. On a certain level, low income people always figure out how to make it work. So there's that. But yeah, the community, the scene, whatever you'd like to call it, is just very drastically different than when I was there. Some of that is I don't want to fall into that like, well, when I was young, it was the streets were filled with poets. I don't want to be like that because I might not know what's happening right now because I'm 54 years old, So yeah, I know that there are still like young and emerging writers in the Bay Area. There's still young and emerging writers in New York City, So, but I think like I don't know like what's going on in Minneapolis. Like Minneapolis seems kind of cool. Like the Midwest, there's like some stuff happening. There's like some real freaky freaks out there like writing and making community and stuff.
Totally.
So yeah, I think that I don't know what the future holds for you in the Bay Area, but I think you just have to trust that you'll find your people wherever you go. You can always, if it's not working out, I don't know, man. You can always flip a coin and go somewhere else. That's what I did, you know.
Is that how you moved to
There's
LA?
God, I can't remember. I don't think so. It is How I Moved to San Francisco. I flipped a
I love
coin
that.
between, yeah, between San Francisco and Adobe Land, which was women's land in the desert of Arizona. Thank the goddess that that didn't
Yes.
happen. I don't think I would have been very happy there. I don't think it would have brought out the best of my vaguely, traumatized young self. I'm really happy where I ended up. No, I came to LA because so many of my friends left the Bay Area because of housing
Right.
issues. They came here, and it was also during this moment where a lot of people that I knew were suddenly kind of getting involved with television. It was like 2015. It seemed like suddenly maybe queer people could write for television,
Right.
and I kind of gave that a try, but man, you need to want that in such a dysfunctional way to stick it
Yeah.
out. I stuck it out for a little bit, but I was like, damn, this is stupid. This is like a lot of work, and I don't want to look at the end of it. Like
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, you're not the first person I've heard that from. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, no doubt.
yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and as someone who has lived in the Bay and in Los Angeles, I just want to echo some of what you shared, but also echo what you named, that if you're meant to find your people, you will find them no matter where you are, and I really believe that too. Yeah, so I'm gonna ask the next question. This one is from Neo, Indiana, and they want to know, what is your go-to tarot deck?
Great question. My go-to tarot deck is the one that's always right here on my desk, right next to me. It's the Thoth deck. I learned to read with this and with the Rider-Waite deck, sort of, I think maybe in the same year when I was like around 16 years old. And so I know those two decks the best. And yeah, I don't know. I really love this deck, the Thoth deck. And because I know it so well, it's what I use, if I'm doing readings for other people.
Yeah.
Um, I also though, yeah, I love tarot decks and I have too many. I'm trying to not be a hoarder of them. It got scary for a minute because I had a podcast and it was like a mystical tarot podcast, and all of a sudden I was getting all kinds of decks in the mail. I was getting like the cannabis deck. I was like, guess who's not your audience? Cannabis deck. Like peace, but like I was just getting so many decks. So yeah, I had to give some away. I do have a really special relationship with these two decks, the She-Wolf Tarot and
Yeah.
also the Secret Dakini Oracle. And every new moon and full moon, I do a like check-in with those two decks and sort of look at like what's up, what does the next 2 weeks leading up to the next kind of moon moment look like? And I love those. I love those a lot. But obviously we're in a tarot renaissance, and we have been for so long. I don't even
No,
think it's a renaissance
yeah.
anymore. I think it's just this is just
Yeah,
life
it's a
now.
multiverse
Tarot is
now.
part of the world. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I love that.
Me too. I love that too. And I just want to share, for if anyone's interested, I have my deck right here. I love the Collective Tarot. It's like a queer trans tarot deck that was made in Portland, Oregon. It's like the one I learned on. And so definitely can connect with that. But I'm also similar to you, where like folks send me decks all the time. And definitely I'm like a multi-deck user when I do readings. Sometimes I like to kind of play with a lot of decks sometimes. But it also, yeah, it can also become a problem too. So I resonate with that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I love the Collective
Yeah.
Tarot also. It's such a great deck.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I have two questions here from Mike Marple. They want to know, how does Michelle know when something is substantial enough to become a book versus an essay or etc.?
That's a good question. Well, I guess with a book, if it's going to be a book, you're going to have a lot of different ideas for it, right? So I might have an idea about an essay, like I want to jump into this thing. But then are there other things kind of adjacent to that thing? Does that thing make you think about all these other things? Like,
Ooh,
is it like a focal point and then it branches off into all these other things? I think that is maybe the difference,
yeah.
between a whole book and an essay. I think, also it is very mysterious. I think, the thing to do is maybe just sit down and whatever that spark is the story that you want to tell, the essay, write it. and see what happens. Maybe you can't stop and it is a book, right? Or
Right.
maybe it makes you think of all these other things and you want to keep branching off and doing asides, then I think it's a book. Yeah. But if you're like, I just want to tell this little story and it's more compact, even if it's a long form one, it kind of just has a very clear beginning, middle, and end, then I think it's probably maybe an essay. I feel like it's almost your call though too. If you're like, I kind of want to keep thinking about this topic or this world, like,
Mm.
well, what else is there then maybe, Like you can maybe make it happen for yourself.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Like, I'm almost imagining it like a constellation or a web that starts to
Mhm.
emerge as you're writing. I'm also really like thinking about the way that you shared earlier of how you were writing in a really like kind of going on multiple journeys and then all of a sudden realizing you're sitting with something. And I do feel like for myself, like that is like a way of working as an artist that I really resonate with. I think that's why I made my last episode on nonlinear psychic collaboration because there've been so many times where I've like started something and I forget about it. And years later, it's like, hi, I'm here again. I'm back to like be published now, And like,
Yes.
yeah. So totally,
Oh my
totally know the
gosh.
flow.
That's so cool. I have the next book I have coming out is coming out in this fall on the Feminist Press, and it's a story I started writing in 2011, and
Oh,
I put
so
it
good.
down, and then for years, and then yeah, exactly, it popped back up, and I was like, oh, I guess I should finish you, and now it has a home.
Yeah.
I love nonlinear psychic collaboration. That's so cool.
Yeah. It's definitely been a huge part of my practice. And yeah, and I think, this will connect a little bit what we're talking about to Miki's second question, which where she asks, how does Michelle know when to let a project go versus to keeping at it? Especially if it's something that you've been working on a long time and that you've maybe been met with a lot of roadblocks.
That is such a good question. Okay, well, you know, the roadblocks thing is interesting. I think I'm a little impatient. And so that, I can only give you kind of a personal answer. I'm personally a little impatient. And
Hmm.
also, I always have more ideas than I have lives in which to do them. So I think when things get too blocked, I kind of just put them down and go to something else. Because, yeah, I guess like if something is really what I guess I don't know what kind of roadblocks, if they're like external blocks that are kind of beyond your control, or if they're like personal blocks, like a writing block, which can feel like it's beyond your control. I guess it is. But yeah, I guess if something feels too I just will try to move on to something else. That has bit me in the butt before, though, because I did realize at one point, especially with writing fiction, writing memoir is really natural for me. Writing fiction is harder. And I had this moment where I had these different ideas and I just went with one of them. And I was like, yes, this is it. This is great. And I wrote into it and I was 50 pages in. And then I was like, this is wrong. This is the wrong idea. I think the other one was the right idea. And then I went back and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this one now. And I start 50 pages in, same thing. And I'm like, oh,
Oh no.
the like, once the limerence wears off, it's like, oh,
Right.
and you do have to, if you want it to be a longer form, if you want it to be more than 50 pages, you got to just devote yourself to it. So I do now, if I've gotten that deep into a piece, like 50 pages,
Mhm.
I'm gonna stick with it because I know now that my natural inclination is to not want to do it because the work's gotten a little bit hard and I hate
Right.
hard work because my dream job is being a secret heiress that never has to work and can just lay, travel, and donate. That's what I would like to do. But that's not, that's what my, yeah. But so I can't do that. So I have to just buckle down and push through it. And that's the unfun part of writing, right? Is like it's really fun when that inspiration is hot and you feel like
Yeah.
you're cooking, but sometimes sometimes it's not like that, but you still have to do the work. And so you just have to trust that. I think that's when your kind of raw skill comes through. Readers can't always tell that you're not super inspired while you're writing. I think they're not thinking about it. There are some pieces of writing which feel so inspired, obviously, where you're like, wow, this person was really inspired. But I think, most books that you're reading, you're not like, is this person inspired now? You don't, you just got to trust that it's going to still sound good and you got to push yourself through it.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that it's really helpful to have at least this understanding that there might be a moment where you're like, becomes work, right? And I'm just gonna have to slog through it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's about knowing yourself, right? It's about knowing your own patterns and your inclinations, you know. It was so eye-opening to see that I hit the same got the same feeling, you know, at the same I was like, "Oh, this is just because it's hard and I feel like it's supposed to feel just blissful and easy all the time," and
Yeah.
it's just not true, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, can totally resonate as an artist too. That does wear
Yeah.
off in art practice as well. And it becomes work sometimes. And yeah, you just have to keep going to finish the vision. Okay, so this last question, I feel like it's connected. We're kind of talking a little bit about it. Sophia Ine asks, how does your practice as a witch inform your writing process? Are there specific rituals you engage in when you start a new project?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I do feel like writing is, you know, it's part of well, I feel like I'm a mystical being, right? And writing is part of that. It's like one of the things that I have in this incarnation or whatever it is. And so I do like to sort of tend to my altar beforehand, do the things that I like to do in my altar, kind of get my altar revved up. I don't always meditate before I write, but I'm a dummy not to because it's really, really great to meditate before you write. And when I teach writing, I teach a writing for witches class, and we all meditate before we write, and it's awesome. You know, it's a great practice, and I can't recommend it enough. Even though I am guilty of not doing it all the time. So yeah, I like to do that. You know, always having tarot cards right next to my computer when I'm working. Sometimes I'm just like, is this right? And I'll just grab it and it's like, oh yeah, I'm
Yeah.
working. It's right, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes I'll do that. I am torn a lot between different projects. And so sometimes if I feel kind of equal towards all of them, I'll do a reading on which one looks like it does have the most open road, the most ease, the most joy, the most, you know, which one is going to kind of give back to me, whether it's, you know, in success or good vibes, enjoyment. So yeah, I do that. You know, I like to have crystals. I mean, I am one of those crystal people. I like to have little crystals nearby. It's like my fidget spinner, basically, when I'm just
Yeah.
like thinking. Um, so yeah, I think ritual is really great. I feel like most writers, creative people are sort of ritually inclined. And I have seen that happen. And I've seen that manifest as a lot of superstitions where people need their special pen or their special notebook. Or I used to think that like, oh, I can't write if X, Y, and Z has already happened in the day. I need some sort of purity, or I can't write at this hour. I can't write at that hour. And working closely with other writers, like in retreat settings, you know, I mentioned that Radar, my organization, we
Mhm.
did a retreat. And it was like, you know, we had somebody come to it once who was somebody who had they'd gone to McDowell, they'd gone to Yaddo, and they were like, guys, this is not a retreat. I'm like, I don't know, whatever it is. It's like a punk house version of a retreat. Like people were
Right.
sharing beds. We're all writing around a kitchen table. You know, it was very DIY. But we all got to see how each other, it challenged all of us in different ways as far as what we think we need in order to be creative. And as it turned out, we really didn't need any of those things. Like we probably needed coffee, but that
Yeah.
was really it. You know, we could all work differently than what we think. So I think that it can be kind of great to have a ritual in place to almost prevent you from just like clinging on to weird superstitions that don't necessarily serve you, but also knowing that like the ritual isn't making the writing come either. You know what I mean? It's like I just think that I think that writing and creativity in general is so mysterious. Like why does it feel great sometimes? Why doesn't it? How did I get these ideas? Where are they from?
Right.
That we it's really easy to kind of externalize them and be like, "Oh, it's my lucky pen made it all happen," or you know what I mean? And it's like just know that like it's mysterious. It's not the pen. It's somehow you, right? Whatever you are, it's somehow you. And dress it up with ritual because it's so nice to honor this strange life we're living and this, you know, gift that you've been given that you desire to be creative. You know, do ritual to honor that, but don't feel like, oh, I didn't do my ritual, so now my writing's going to suck today. Or, you know, don't watch out for that.
Such an important distinction. And yeah, thank you for naming all those. I think it's so important to remember that as a witch and as an artist and writer. I think it is so important to remember that ritual is really important, can create a container, and also to not become dependent on it, to know that the mystery of creativity can show up in any place at any time. And I could talk with you forever, Michelle, and I'm just so
Same,
grateful for your
same.
time. Yeah, this has been so lovely. And I just, as a way to close, would love for you to share how folks can get in touch with you or learn more about you.
Sure. I guess, I guess I'm mostly active if on Instagram. I'm at Michelle Tease, T-E-A Michelle Teaz. And my press, Dopamine Books, is also there on Instagram as Dopamine Books LA. And you can see all the cool stuff that we're doing. Pretty much. I have a website that I ignore and is probably out of date, but you can email me through that. So it's just
Wonderful.
like michellet.com or something, I think. Yeah.
Yay! Wonderful. I'll make sure to include all those links in the
Thank you.
description. And again, such a gift to connect with you. And I'm so looking forward to our book release event. And I'll be sure to also put the info that I have for that in the notes as well so that folks can join us when it
Awesome.
happens in like a month or so, I think.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
coming up. We'll make flyers for it soon. We're like finalizing some stuff, but yeah, very
Yeah.
exciting.
Wonderful. All
Okay,
right.
cool. All
Bye.
right. Bye.
As we come to the end of this beautiful conversation with Michelle T, I'm struck by how our artistic voices naturally evolve throughout our creative journeys. Michelle shared how her writing transformed from those punchy 5-minute performance pieces meant to grab attention at open mics to more spacious, nuanced works that allow readers to take their time with her words. This evolution reminds me of my own artistic metamorphosis. I've noticed how my own creative voice has shifted as I've engaged with different communities and audiences over the years. There's something profound in recognizing that our art can be both deeply personal, helping us process our own experiences and envision new possibilities for ourselves, while also evolving to serve different purposes as our intentions change. What feels particularly magical to me is how art that begins as personal expression so often becomes the bridge to community. Michelle's journey from creating zines and chapbooks to founding Sister Spit, Radar Productions, and now Dopamine Books beautifully illustrates how creativity can gather people together across time and space. Our art becomes a spell that calls in our people, much like young Michelle standing at her fence saying, I have books, come play with me. In a world where connection sometimes feels fragile, our creative expressions offer us a way to find each other, to build community, and to locate ourselves within something larger. And yes, there will always be that dance between our most authentic voice and our desire to reach wider audiences. That tension Michelle described between the strange, wild edges of ourselves and the instinct to make our work more digestible. But perhaps it's within that very tension that we find our unique magic and our contribution to the world. Now, do not forget that your art is a spell and that it will change your life and the world around you. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Thank you for listening to Your Art is a Spell. We invite you to subscribe in order to know when the next episode drops. You can also sign up to my newsletter by going to yourartisaspell.com. My newsletter is the first place where I share about upcoming episodes. I also use it as a place to ask for reflections, to find new people to interview, as well as invite you to share your questions. You can send me your questions via email, or you can send a voice note by by going to speakpipe.com/yourartisaspell. If you're watching this on YouTube, I invite you to like and subscribe and to leave me a comment so that we can stay connected. Thank you so much for being here, and don't forget that your art and magic are more important than ever.